Hi everyone, Wasim Parkar over here. Another fantastic day over here on the eastern coast of North America in the Toronto area. The weather is absolutely fantastic, and we're about an hour away from day two starting at the US Open. Day one was very interesting. I can't remember another day one at a Grand Slam with so many five setters. Who would have thought that? I mentioned some matches to watch out for. Some of them were a bit of an anticlimax. Kuznetsova, Schiavone, after playing so many thrillers, Kuznetsova won 6-1, 6-2 quite easily. But I did predict that Novak Djokovic would face some difficulties against Jerzy Janowicz, and he did. And the number one looked a little bit off color, but nonetheless, he won through in four sets in what was a very strange match. Lots of errors. There was very little clean hitting. It was just sort of a surreal feeling watching that game. The game after the women's match between Madison Keys and Alison Risk was spectacular. The match finished almost at 2 a.m. in the morning with Madison Keys prevailing in a tight three-setter. So hopefully we'll see some great matches on day two as well. There's some exciting games, some big matchups right up in the first round. There's some games today for the tennis purists. Maybe if you're a casual follower, you might not find these games interesting. Nonetheless, I've picked up some games. It's also interesting to see that a lot of the players were struggling. There were walkovers and retirements. So you know what? Let's just check. Let's just check what the temperature is in New York today. Okay, 33 feels like 36. So it's another hot day for the tennis players. So maybe we might unfortunately see some retirements. What was noticeable on the first round, both in the day session and the evening session, there were a lot of short points. I don't know if that's something that's going to be sustained throughout the tournament, but there were a lot of short points, not a lot of long rallies. So generally, that's conducive to upsets taking place in a Grand Slam. So that being said, here are my picks for the games to watch on day two. And right off the bat at 11 a.m. on Arthur Ashe, the first game itself today, Kirsten Flipkens versus Simona Halep. Yeah, so you've got a Wimbledon semifinalist playing a Grand Slam runner-up in the first round. And Flipkens, of course, caused a huge upset at the Olympics as well when she beat Venus Williams in the first round. Now, Halep's coming into the tournament in really good form. She's been very consistent throughout the summer. So really, she should win. She has more game. That inside-out forehand of hers is absolutely fantastic. But Flipkens is sort of one of those tricky players. You don't really know what to do when she gets in a groove. She slices and dices, and not very common in women's tennis. And she has a kind of game that can upset a player's rhythm. And if it's as hot as it's supposed to be, and if Flipkens gets into a groove, maybe wins a set, you could see Simona Halep getting flustered and the small chance of an upset over there. Right after that, on Arthur Ashe, there's really an amazing order of play over there today. Is Stan Wawrinka versus Fernando Verdasco. So Australian two-time Grand Slam champion up against a Australian Open semi-finalist, Wimbledon quarterfinalist, and Verdasco with his left-handed serve is a very dangerous opponent. I don't think he's really built on his talent. He's sort of fallen away in his career in the later stages, but nonetheless, he remains a dangerous opponent. After all, earlier this year, he did beat his compatriot Rafa Nadal in the first round at the Australian Open. So he's not the kind of opponent you want to play in the first round if you're a high seed. So Stan Wawrinka will have to watch out. And Wawrinka, even though he's seeded three, I think he's tailing off a little bit. The high standards he set for himself last year when he won the French Open, reached the semis at the US Open, semis at the Australian. This year hasn't been that great. Lost in the quarters at Australia, failed to defend, failed to even reach the final at Roland Garros because he lost in the semis to Andy Murray. And then at Wimbledon, he was upset by Juan Martín del Potro. So I think it's a game between two big hitters. It's a very, very interesting match. And once again, shorter points. With shorter points, does Verdasco have a chance? I'd be surprised if Stan won in straight sets. I really would. I still think he's a favorite, but this is definitely a key match to watch out for on day two. I expect a lot of fireworks in that one. Now, one interesting game that's taking place on court 12 is 16 seed Feliciano Lopez, who always does quite well at the US Open. Lopez generally makes it to the round of 16. He's had a couple of quarterfinal appearances as well. He's played some great matches at the US Open against the likes of Djokovic, Murray, and even Federer. I remember a great four-set match because his serve and volley style serves as a good contrast, and the courts suit his style of play. He's playing Croatian teenager Borna Koric. Now, Koric has been hyped up for about a year now. Many people are expecting him to make a breakthrough at least at some point in 2017, although he has the talent to even make the breakthrough at the US Open in terms of reaching the third round or fourth round. I remember last year at the US Open in a night match, he played Rafa Nadal. He lost in four sets, but for about two sets, he went toe to toe with Nadal. So this precocious teenager does have something, and I think that will make for an interesting match between Lopez and the Croatian. So another match to definitely keep an eye out for. The next game I've picked, this is an interesting one. Laura Robson, who actually got a wild card into the US Open because she won a challenger despite being ranked 260. She won a challenger just last week and she got a wild card to the US Open. Now, at one time, big things were expected of Laura Robson. Many thought she had the game to at least be a top 10 player, but then the last 2 years have been decimated by injury. But there's signs that she is coming back to her best form, and she's playing her fellow Brit, Naomi Brady. Now, this is more of a semantic thing for me. It's quite interesting. You'd expect Andy Murray to win his first round match tonight against Lucas Rosol. Yesterday, another British, Kyle Edmund, thrashed Richard Gasquet. That was a huge upset, and I don't use that word lightly. It was 6-2, 6-2, 6-3. So we could have the first time ever four British singles players into the second round at the US Open. So I think there's a real uptick in tennis over there. Lots of people are getting passionate about the sport, and you can see some great development courtesy of the LTA over there. Not that different from here in Canada, where we're seeing a big uptake as well, and lots of young players coming through. It's quite exciting to see two nations developing a good tennis legacy. Another game, and this is more for the tennis purists, is Alexander Dolgopolov against David Ferrer. Now, on paper, this might not be a game that might excite everyone, but David Ferrer and Dolgopolov have played some really good matches at Grand Slams before. And Dolgopolov is one of those, talented players. When he's hot, he's really, really hot. And whereas David Ferrer, he's known as Mr. Consistent, Mr. Solid, but 2016 really hasn't been that solid for him. So we'll have to see how this game goes. In fact, Dolgopolov even beat Ferrer earlier in the year on the Mexican hardcourt season. So anything's possible in this game. Ferrer is a favorite, but Ferrer's been getting upset a lot this year. So this is a match to watch out for. Again, fast courts. Dolgopolov likes hitting the ball flat and hard. For that matter, so does Ferrer, actually. Ferrer is not a player to be intimidated by fast conditions like other traditional Spanish clay courters. But nonetheless, there is potential for an upset over here. Should be a very interesting match. The last men's match I'm going to talk about today is Gilles Simon versus Radek Stepanek. I just have no idea how old Stepanek is now. He really must be, I'm guessing he must be 37 or 38. I'm sure I could look it up for you guys right now. I'll leave that research to some of you. And both these players, I think this is a very enjoyable match because these are two men's players who don't rely on power at all. I'm be very surprised to see any sort of big hitting in this match. They're sort of veterans. Both Gilles Simon's the kind of player, he loves taking pace off the ball. He relies on his opponent's powers to dictate play because he likes, he does a soft forehand, soft backhand, not necessarily slices. His key is generating pace off his opponent's shots. Now, Radek Stepanek's not the kind of player who's going to hit the ball hard because he loves slicing, dicing, and his volleys are just remarkable to watch. Now, he's one of those players I think most of us can agree in the tennis world. He's fun to watch, even though he's not actually a very successful singles player, but he's a lot of fun to watch, and I, for one, will enjoy this game between two veterans who don't rely on power. And the final match I'm going to talk about is on Arthur Ashe. I'm going to go back to Arthur Ashe. The evening match to kick off things is Serena Williams versus Ekaterina Makarova. Now, I think this is a great match. And Serena Williams, of course, comes into the US Open with the quest, now having tied Steffi Graf at 22 Grand Slams. Her next quest is to overtake Steffi Graf. And of course, she's an odds-on favorite at her best. There is no player on the WTA Tour who can rival her. But that being being said, this is a tricky first round match. After all, Ekaterina Makarova just reached the US Open semifinals, I think 2 years ago. Yeah, 2014, she reached the semifinals. So playing a semifinalist in your first round is not the easiest game. Also, Serena hasn't played a lot in the lead up to the US Open. At the Olympics, you could clearly tell she wasn't completely fit. She suffered a shock defeat. It's the first time she didn't have a medal at the Olympics. So there may be some doubts coming in. And it's a kind of game. Now, Serena is a kind of player who grows into a Grand Slam. She usually reaches her best around the round of 16 or the quarterfinals. She's most vulnerable usually in the first few rounds. So I think this is going to be a very exciting match. Ekaterina Makarova is, of course, a double specialist. So she's got a great serve and volley game. She's very comfortable at the net. The key thing, though, is can she generate the right kind of approach shots to come to the net against Serena, because Serena is also very good. Despite everyone talking about her power, Serena is a very good defensive player, and passing shots are not that difficult for her. So the key over here is Serena completely match fit? And can the night conditions, sort of how they ruffled Djokovic yesterday, can the night conditions also ruffle Serena Williams? So that should be an interesting match. So, folks, I've picked 7 matches on day 2 compared to day 5. I just thought there were more interesting connotations today, both semantically, technically, tactically. And I'm hoping at least 3 or 4 of these matches turn out to be as good as one would expect them to be. So I hope you guys enjoyed day 2, which starts in about an hour. I'll be back with some previews for day 3 tomorrow. Cheers.